There was a time that feels just like yesterday where I felt miserable. And I mean miserable. You ever been working a job that you hate? You just absolutely hate going to this place. You despise it. You ever felt repulsed by yourself? You look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, who am I? Who is this person staring back at me? You ever feel disgusted, unfulfilled, lackluster? Just the feeling of meaninglessness, purposelessness in your life. That's where I was about 10 years ago. That's definitely where I was. And, I take a lot of the blame for that because I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have clarity. I lacked clarity. And that's not really a rarity in life. A lot of people lack clarity. There's a disparity. A lot of people lack clarity. But I was one of those people. And I worked so many different jobs. Over 20 jobs, I can say that I worked. Just odd jobs here and there. I worked in Austin as a maze room operator. People would actually pay money to get locked inside of a room and have to find their way out. And I'd be on the radio.
The key is underneath the couch, agent.
I'd be like talking to them in the room, watching them on the cameras. It was actually a lot of fun. I didn't hate that job. Poker dealing at a poker house in Round Rock. It wasn't for me, but I didn't hate that job. Working as an Austin Ninjas, American Ninja Warrior kids instructor for kids at this jungle gym. I didn't hate that job. It wasn't miserable there. I actually had fun. Working in Wimberley Zipline Adventures as a zipline tour guide, zipping all the way along the lines in the sky and taking people on tours. That actually was pretty fun. I didn't hate that job. Working as a telemarketer for a real estate brokerage, connecting people with different lenders and different brokers and people, that was okay. But there was one job I absolutely despised. I hated this job. Stocking groceries on the shelves. Stocking the shelves at a grocery store in H-E-B. Now, H-E-B is a grocery store here in Texas. And I was working as an overnight stocker. We would work from 10 at night till 10 in the morning, graveyard shift. So I was getting no sunlight. No sunlight. I was waking up in the afternoon, evening, and I was just going to work at 10 at night, 10 p.m., and I would get out at 10 a.m. and I'll go straight to sleep, right? And this job, I'm telling you, I couldn't wait to just be gone. I would just go there and I would just dread this job. You ever had a job that you fear it? Like you don't even want to go near it. And it's sucking your soul. It's draining your spirit. That was this job for me. Bussing down pallets, just stocking the shelves. And this was during, towards the end of November. They already started the Christmas music. So this was all throughout December. And I only worked there for a few months. I didn't even make it to a year working this job. Just a few months. But that was enough. That was enough to know what I didn't want for my life. And I remember just hearing this Christmas songs over and over again. We would have headphones because we couldn't stand the music. Just jingle bell, jingle bell, jingle bell rock. Right? It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas everywhere you go. Baby, it's cold outside. And that was me at H-E-B. And if you didn't know what it looks like, this is what it looks like. This is H-E-B, the grocery store right here in Texas. You see there, H-E-B. The parking lot is always full on days like this. So working that job, I mean, man, this was where I had an insane caffeine habit. And you could actually, it was more than a habit, it was an addiction. It was full-blown addiction. I had an addiction without any restriction for caffeine. Guy was telling me, hey, you know, if you want some energy, and a good alternative would be a Fuji apple. So eat a Fuji apple. So I started off with the Fuji apple. Then I went to a couple of Gatorades. From there, I went to the Red Bull. And then I would have a Monster. And if that didn't carry me over from like 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock, I would have half of an Adderall, which at the time wasn't even for my own prescription. It wasn't even my own prescription. It was, I was in college. So it was a college girl, one of my classmates, that gave me part of her own prescription. So I was getting Adderall from her, you know, these pharmaceuticals to tide me over. And I mean, I was whacked out. I was jacked up. My adrenals were jacked up. My kidneys, my liver, my pancreas, probably everything. My body was jacked. You know, I was high on adrenaline. I thought I could do calculus, advanced geometry, trigonometry, all at the same time. I thought I could solve, you know, Albert Einstein equations, right? I thought I was on top of the world, just stocking the shelves, just high on Monsters and energy drinks and just caffeine and just taurine and whatever that is, right? I don't even know what those chemicals are, but my body was full of them, just running with venom, poison, really, just running on poison and running on fumes, really. So I was heading to my doom, running on fumes. There was no room, you know, for peace. There was no room for my passion. There was no room for my purpose. Even though technically I was being in service. I remember one of my coworkers I was talking to there while I was working at H-E-B, and, you know, he would talk about, you know, the cars he wanted to drive, the places he wanted to go, the lifestyle he wanted to have, the houses he wanted to be in, and the, you know, just the places he wanted to travel. He didn't want to be there for that long, and it wasn't a long-term plan for any of us. We knew that this was a temporary job. This was temporary, you know, graveyard shift. You're not going to be slaving like this forever. And when I finally left that job, it took me a while to recover. You know, my skin was so pale. I hadn't had sunlight in so long that my skin was pale. I just looked like a vampire. You know, I was vamping. When I left that job and went to California, you know, if you've followed me here, you know my story. I'll spare you all the details, but, you know, basically I ran into the monks and nuns from Myanmar, from Burma. They taught me about meditation. They taught me about raising your vibration. They taught me about, you know, letting go of frustration and all of that stuff. And it really just changed my whole life when I met the monks and nuns. When I came back to Texas from California, and it had been 10 years later, by some coincidence or some series of events, I found myself at that same H-E-B in New Braunfels. And I was walking through the grocery store, just getting some juice. And out of the corner of my eye, I seen somebody. And you ever have that feeling like the hairs stand on the back of your neck? You're like, you get that spidey senses tingling. You're almost like, wait, do I know this person? I'm like, I know this guy. Where have I seen him before? It was one of the coworkers at the store. It was one of the workers. And I said, I know him from somewhere. Where do I know him from? I've seen him before. All of a sudden, my eyes lit up. And it was like he noticed that I was staring at him, because energy is real. You can feel somebody looking at you. And he turned, he seen me, I seen him. He looked at me. I looked at him. He nodded. I nodded back, and we just went our separate ways. We just went our separate ways. Right? And I'll never forget that moment, because that was him. That was my old coworker. I don't even remember his name, but I remembered his face, and he was still there. 10 years later, a decade had passed, and he was still in the same job at the same location. He had not moved. Now, I don't know his situation. I don't know his circumstances. Maybe he had kids to take care of. He had a whole family. Maybe he had responsibilities. Maybe he had bills. You know, who knows what he had on his back to still be working there, because the only reason why I was working there at that small period of time, that short duration, was to make $1. I needed money to stay at the place that we were staying in Austin, Texas. We were in a townhome. So I was just doing it for the money. That was it. But I didn't even have the financial acumen or the sensory, the financial acuity to manage my finances. So I was just stuck in that situation, in that cycle, just, going to work to make the money, to get the food, to have the energy to go back to work, to make the money, to get the food, to have the energy to go back to work, to make the money, to get the food, to have the energy to go back to work. I was in that cycle for like so long. And it just, after a while, it just felt wrong, especially when I got around the monks, and they were just, Hakuna Matata, right? No worries. What are you worried about? What are you slaving for? What are you craving for, right? I knew that he did not want to be there for 10 years. But 10 years went by. And when I saw that guy, I said, oh my God, my life would have been a living hell if I had had to stay at that job for a decade. I don't know how he did it. I said I was not in heaven on aisle 11 and aisle 7. Okay, it was not heaven, right? But had I stayed at that place, I don't know where I'd be. I wouldn't be me, right? I wouldn't be free. And here's my message to you, my friend. They say that a day goes long. You've had those slow days, right? Those really slow days that just crawl. A day could be long. Especially when you're in a job or you're doing something that you hate. A day could be long. But a decade goes like that. I'm telling you, as I look at this HEB, it was just yesterday. It feels like just yesterday I was in that market, like stocking those shelves, hating my life, depressed, stressed, under duress, not doing my best. But had I stayed in that same place, around the same faces, in the same spaces, running the same races, right? Just the rat race. Just being complacent and being adjacent to people that didn't even care. We were just there. I don't know where I'd be. I don't know who I'd be today. So I'm letting you know, my friend, a year from now, a year will have passed. 10 years from now, 10 years will have passed. Whether you go after your dream, your purpose, your ambition, your vision, whatever you see with your own intuition, if you do it or not, The time is going to pass by anyway. So realize that now. You might be in a job, in a situation. You might be somewhere with complications. You might have confrontations with yourself. You might be battling with your health. And asking yourself, you know what? Let me just be at this place for this amount of time until I get back aligned. Let me just be at this place for this amount of time until I start seeing the signs. I'm telling you, the time will pass by anyway. And if you're not careful, it'll be quicker than you know. Time has a tendency to just go. And a day might seem slow, but a decade is quick. So take your pick, right? Do you want a life chasing your dream? Fulfilling meaning? Or a life doing what you feel is just necessary while inside you're screaming, right? They say discipline weighs ounces, but regret weighs tons. And you don't want to be the one looking back on your life, looking at all the hours, the days, the minutes, the time that you had at your disposal, the time that you had available for you, that everybody has. This is the one commodity we do not get back. It is non-refundable. You do not get it back. Money, they're printing it. They're printing it as we speak. People are printing and taking money and putting them on conveyor belts, just money. And they're just printing it and they're just shipping it out. It's printing. But time? There's no printing that. They don't print time. That's something that cannot be printed. That's something that cannot be minted, right? Time is the most valuable thing we have. And if you find yourself in a place that you say, I would not want to be here in 5 years, get out. Like that movie, you seen that movie, Get Out? Get out. Get out as quick as you can. Because the power is in your hands. Never feel that you're powerless. Even if you feel you lack the resources, you always have the resourcefulness. You can find a way. It's gonna be okay. You'll find a way. You'll do it. You'll make it happen. But you realize that you are the captain. Don't settle. Don't be complacent. Don't stay stuck. Don't get caught in the muck and just feel like, hey, that's just my luck. If you don't get that energy flowing, you'll never know where you could be going. You'll never know what blessings could be showing up in your life. I was 24 10 years ago. If I could go back and do things differently, I would. It wasn't all roses. It wasn't all good. Right here, right now, is the present, the gift. And when you realize the gift, everything shifts. You realize you can lift yourself out of anything. But you have to believe. And it all starts with what you perceive. What is your perception? What is the reflection? And what is that deep inner connection? So spend some time getting clarity and introspection to move yourself in a brighter direction.